All right. All right. So thanks for joining us, everyone, for this kind of first part in a two-part series on practicing the Prajnaparamita. We'll see what we get into here. It's a very big topic, and we'll see what comes out. My idea is to, besides sort of teaching on the topic of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, mainly emptiness and how those are, commented on in the middle way teachings or the Madhyamaka. My idea is to kind of really focus around practice, focus around your questions. I know a lot of you are longtime students and have a strong connection to these teachings already. So hopefully we can kind of go more in depth together. And if you're new or don't feel shy, and if some of it's kind of like over your head, just keep going. I think when the Dharma's over our head, it gives us something to aspire to. When something's confusing, it gives us some kind of longing to employ on both understanding and then, of course, realizing the Dharma. And so that longing is a really important part through aspiration, right? So I think when we get stuck, we need to keep the mind uplifted. Okay, but also at the same time, as we're going to see in these talks, the next 2 Thursdays, the Prajnaparamita, what's actually more important than we could say like a definitive answer, is more how we ask a question. So even if we're confused or we're sort of like, or we have some past knowledge of teachings on emptiness, but we're still kind of, grappling with it. It's not really about the answer, gaining the knowledge and having some sort of like words to talk about. That I think that's, of course, that's a feat of its own, and that's part of our Dharma practice and world of what we're trying to engage. But it's more important, how we're engaging that, the questions we're asking, how we're looking at the mind, how we're looking at our relationship to self, other emotions, thoughts. That's really where this has to be aimed. So I just want to kind of kick that off with that, in that spirit, as opposed to, always getting stuck in sort of the conceptual understanding, which is really just the beginning. It's really sort of what we need to develop to then be able to practice that understanding. So with that said, we can go ahead and we'll do the opening chants, and we are going to chant the Heart Sutra and the spirit of the Prajnaparamita. Okay, so feel free to chant along if you want. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect and in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. So we'll do the mandala first in Tibetan and then in English. Shri Ram Lingji Nide Gyempadi Sangye Jindu Mete Vuari Chokun Namda Jina Chepar Shu. The ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Nirataya. So we'll chant twice in Tibetan and once in English. Sangye Chodan Sogi Chonama Jancho Vardu Dali Kyabsuji Hagi Chinyen Gipe Sonamgi Chola Penchir Sangye Druparsho Sangye Chodan Sogi Chonama Chancho Bardu Dani Kyabsuji Dagi Jinson Dagi Chunin Gipe Sonan Chola Penchir Sangye Druparsho. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so we'll recite the Heart Sutra in English, and I'll try to go at a speed that is a speed we can contemplate a little bit with. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on Mass of Vulture's Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental conscious element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell on the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Great. I'm just gonna add something on my screen here. Okay. So just kind of sitting with that recitation for a second. As we're going to be discussing these kinds of sutras, this being one of the shorter Prajnaparamita sutras, the Heart Sutra, incredibly profound. They have a lot of blessings within them. They're not just words and ideas. Each word is comes with the blessing of the Buddha. Just kind of sitting with that blessing for a second. Blessing meaning like feeling. Sometimes we can define a blessing if our hairs stand up, we feel inspired. The kind of thinking, running, overactive mind releases for a second. Maybe we had an insight into the teachings on emptiness through reciting the sutra. Sitting with that, placing the mind within that heart that's open. And this is how we practice devotion on the Mahayana path. Within that heart of devotion is a sense of compassion. And if you have to generate that conceptually, that's okay right now. Generating just a sense of compassion for yourself and all beings. A sense that even though we all want happiness and want to avoid suffering, most of us, most sentient beings, run towards suffering and run away from happiness. This is a cause for deep compassion, as this is based on a fundamental confusion, a mistaken perception in self and other, a mistaken perception in how we relate to our thoughts and emotions, our bodies, our experience. And yet this mistaken perception is not our nature. According to the Uttara Tantra Shastra, our nature is pure. We all have the seed of Buddhahood, and yet the seed is obscured. Therefore, it doesn't grow, it doesn't open, it doesn't become unveiled. This is really the cause for compassion, or we could say great compassion on the Mahayana path. That our nature is awake. There's always the potential for awakening, and yet it remains obscured. And this is then how we lead into bodhicitta. The cause of bodhicitta is great compassion. And so with this view, we take up the attitude first conceptually, and then that grows exponentially as we practice it more. And I want to be free. I want to grow this seed of Buddha nature. And I want to do this not just for my own benefit, but for the benefit of all beings. What we call aspirational relative bodhicitta. Just recognizing that state of mind, letting it permeate you through the Heart Sutra. Heart Sutra is also imbued with that. And this is also our intention, our motivation for engaging with the Dharma together as a group tonight. And just letting that land in yourself right now. Drop into that. You can flash the conceptual understanding that I'm sure all of you have, and just let that land in your heart for a second. Drop the conceptual. Okay. Thank you very much. So, as I said, we have the pleasure of talking about the Prajnaparamita, or otherwise known as transcendent wisdom, for the next 2 Thursdays. And as this is sort of the major theme, according to the wisdom teachings, and especially in our tradition, in the middle way teachings, expounded on by Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and many, many Tibetan commentators and yogis and scholars. So, most of you are going to be familiar with this to some extent, because it's sort of, it's embedded in our lineage, and you could say the heart of the lineage is the Prajnaparamita, right? When you really look at it, it's the heart of it. So, hence the Heart Sutra. So, first, I just wanted to talk about sort of this in context. And, I know many of you are longtime students, but maybe we have a few people here who are newer. I see familiar faces, but I don't know everyone. Oh, by the way, my name's Scott. It's nice to meet you. I've been to the center before, but a long time ago, before the pandemic. I am an aspiring Buddhist practitioner. And I really feel a lot of joy and also trepidation in being able to share the Dharma with you tonight. By no means am I a definitive source in this. I mean, I think really the Buddha is the definitive source in this, if we're being very honest. But what I mean, just on a very, very, small relative level, is, my knowledge is still growing in this. And as I said in the beginning, the Prajnaparamita sutras are probably the most profound teachings in Buddhism. So it's like, it doesn't get more profound than those sutras. So with that said, it's like, I'm going to try my best to engage us in a way with these, and hopefully, like, I can hear from you too, and hear what's coming up for you, and that's going to help me too to make the teaching worthwhile for you, make it more applicable, right? So just introducing a little bit, why are these? If we were to say, like, why are these the heart of the Mahayana Dharma, or heart of Mahayana Buddhism? In my opinion, in studies, here we really have to look back to the roots of the Dharma. The roots of, based in the Four Noble Truths, based in the Shravakyana vehicle, or you could say, like, the basic vehicle of Buddhism leading into Mahayana. This all has to be seen in context, in the sense that the Prajnaparamita sutras are all about expressing what freedom is, right? If we're kind of going to use more of a loose term, what freedom is from a Buddhist perspective. Because I think we're all here for that. I mean, whether we know what freedom is from a Buddhist perspective or not, or we have some taste of it or not, I think as sentient beings, as human beings, we all search for that. We all long for that. And, without getting too prideful or patting ourselves too much on the back, we could say like we found we're here, so it means we found some kind of authentic form or path to freedom. There's a lot of other paths that we may think will lead to freedom but don't. Like, and I just mean anything from like I don't mean any, it's not a comment on other religions per se, just more basic things like um washing our car, eating a delicious meal, going on a vacation, meeting the love of our life. Those are all we could say like bring some sort of joy, but there's also paths that don't bring joy, that can also confuse and mire us more in suffering. Addiction, right? Addiction is one where I don't think most addicts, substance abuse addicts, go into that thinking, I want to be an addict. Like, I don't think many people are thinking that way. Yeah, let's do this. I want to become an addict. No. They're trying to find freedom. I know some people in recovery, a lot of people, and I really respect that recovery path. Often they make great Dharma practitioners because they found what their mind told them was a path to freedom was so false, right? And this is unconscious for us. I mean, it might sound silly to wash one's car as a path to freedom, but when we look at our mind and when there's attachment and clinging involved, what are we doing? So we have to investigate the mind. I like pizza, so when I'm like, I get to have really good pizza, I'm excited. Why does that excitement come? Of course, there's attachment, but at the same time, it's some sort of way where I think I'm going to get the happiness I want, or the happiness I so long for. So another way to talk about freedom is happiness, right? But I like this word freedom because when we really look deeply at the mind in our motivations and behaviors, even to the smallest things like getting up from the chair, sitting down in the chair, all of that, it's really we're seeking some relief. We're seeking some kind of space. We're seeking something to open and shift. And like I said, we're very fortunate that we are interested in the Dharma because it genuinely leads to actual freedom. But as we're going to discuss in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, and and just emptiness teachings in general, that's not so straightforward for a lot of us. Meaning, like when we approach these kinds of teachings, they can be kind of daunting. They can be, how do you put it, confounding, paradoxical. Right? So maybe some of you, just as you're reading the Heart Sutra, maybe it makes sense to some of you because you've been studying, and maybe for some of you it didn't make any sense. So it's that paradox that we're looking at, right? It's that paradox of, we could say, there and not there, that we're looking at, and that's what we're working with. And it's that sort of task that we have to grapple with as a Buddhist practitioner in three ways. And this is going to come up a few times in the teachings. But first, we have to grapple with an understanding, right? This is the first type of wisdom we engage, the wisdom of understanding, or the wisdom of learning. Then we have to grapple with the wisdom of contemplation, right, which produces experience. Then we have to grapple with the wisdom of meditation, which eventually produces direct experience, like beyond just temporary experience. It produces direct realization, which goes beyond just sort of experience going up and down. So it's through these three types of wisdoms of the wisdom of understanding, experience, and realization that we traverse the Buddhist path. And so each one we kind of have to treat not really as like a game or a competition or something to conquer, and I doubt anyone has that kind of attitude, but I had that attitude for many years, so that's why I'm sharing it. This idea that like if I just get this, I'm gonna get it. Like this idea that we can get it. And the Buddha is pointing out again and again in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, if you like, let alone trying to get it, if you think you got it, you didn't get it. So in the Vajrakutta Sutra, for instance, he goes into a lot more, well, it's not the Buddha directly, but the Vajrakutta Sutra goes into a lot more detail on sort of, getting it and not getting it through this question and answer, right? With Subhuti. And so it's similar in the Heart Sutra, it's just a little shorter. So again, going back to kind of this initial thing of grappling with freedom and this kind of quest, and I think, I don't know about you, but when I look at my life, there's nothing I don't do that's based in wanting happiness or wanting to move away from suffering, right? So I think these are the basic contemplations we have to do as a Buddhist practitioner. If we're not doing these and we're not getting some deeper, again, we're not asking these kinds of questions, we're the Buddhist path, it has a little bit of a, how do you put it? Has a chance of going in the wrong direction. And what I mean, there's lots of sidetracks we can go on in a spiritual path and the Buddhist path, but here, a wrong direction means we just become kind of like someone who knows a lot of words and terms and some things, but it didn't really penetrate our heart. It didn't really transform the heart. And again, I don't know all of you that well, so I'm not judging you. I don't know. Really, I should, for me, I'm here to just judge myself, and also recommend you judge yourself as well. And I don't mean judge in the sense of like I'm good or bad Buddhist. That's useless. I mean, like really taking stock once in a while on sort of, are the teachings landing in our heart? And if they're not, we have to find out why. And of course, having qualified spiritual friends is one way we handle this and we work with this. But also, we need to become our own spiritual friend too. This is really, really important. Otherwise, the guru also becomes a way to not have the Dharma not touch our heart. It's possible, actually, believe it or not, but it's a little less risky, because if we have a lot of devotion towards a qualified teacher, spiritual friend, that devotion can also open the heart. It can bring the Dharma from the head to the heart. So there's lots of means here, lots of methods. But overall, when we're talking about the Prajnaparamita Sutras and this topic of perfection of wisdom, it's really about growing this longing for the truth, based in the idea or the experience that we're not free. So basically, developing some sense of renunciation mind, right? Developing some sense of, wow, look at this, I don't want to swear, but let's say quagmire. I never use that word, but really just want to say shit show. But, look at this quagmire I'm in, right? And we get more and more, the more and more we reflect that, it's not that we need to become more depressed, it's that we actually become more and more clear where the stuckness is coming from, where the bondage is coming from in the mind. We become more and more clear in that. And as we become more clear, the more and more we long for freedom. And the more and more we take refuge, the more and more we look to the three jewels as a shelter, as a refuge for guiding us. And mostly the Dharma, right? Because the Dharma is the path that guides us, right? So this is really important. And then, of course, from a Mahayana perspective, if that's not embraced by the mind of bodhicitta, we won't be able to comprehend this Prajnaparamita. So it's very interesting. This is like a big subject that I'm super interested in. I'm not like that much of a scholar kind of person, but I really do enjoy, reading scholarly works from time to time and trying to grapple with them. That grappling and the questions that come out of that really help me to deepen my understanding of these teachings on emptiness. But nonetheless, this topic of like sort of the realization, we're not going to go too much into this in these 2 Thursdays, but I'll just mention it. the realization that an arhat has, the realization of emptiness that an arhat has versus the realization of emptiness that a first bhumi bodhisattva has. And there's a lot of debate back and forth, and it's very, very interesting because it, of course, a lot of it comes down to relative, the mind of bodhicitta, but it's not like a different emptiness. And there's debates on this, different lineages, different schools debate on this. But I think for me, having studied it a little bit, it doesn't make sense that like Shravakyana or what we call arhats or solitary realizers realize a different emptiness than bodhisattvas. I just think they have there's a partial, there's not a full of a realization. And why is that happening? Because the relative hasn't been incorporated as much. And so on a relative level, what we're working with on the path before we actually begin to experience non-conceptual wisdom, or we could say the actual Prajnaparamita, whether it's a piece of it or the full thing, it's that bodhicitta that opens the mind in a certain way. We're talking relative bodhicitta, right? The aspiration, the wish to attain awakening for the benefit of all beings, taking the responsibility that I'm going to do this, which, by the way, is another paradox, right? Because we're saying, I want to attain awakening to awaken all beings, and beings are endless. This is already clear in a lot of the Buddha's sutras. There's no beginning or end to sentient beings, but there is a beginning or end to samsara for us, meaning we can end it, right? And so even in this paradox, it's pointing to these teachings. So even when we're talking about relative bodhicitta, it's pointing to these teachings. So it's so beautiful. The topic isn't so much relative bodhicitta here, but I just want to put out some questions, for you to reflect on, because I reflect on them a lot. So in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, which is an extension, for some lineages, is a kind of an extension of the Prajnaparamita teachings. For others, it's more like provisional, not definitive. But either way, the Uttara Tantra Shastra says a lot of beautiful things. This is where we get the kind of teachings on Buddha nature, and sort of evidence of that, and sort of descriptions of that. But at the same time, it's maybe I'll get it back. I had a bubble that left. We were talking about relative bodhicitta, and then in connection with ultimate bodhicitta or emptiness. That's right. So in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, it kind of brings up this interesting point that Buddhas don't have intention. Enlightened beings don't have intention. On the path, we need intention, obviously. Because intention is a dualistic thing. So, we're dualistic beings at the moment. So we need it. We need to engage some kind of, everything we're doing tonight is dualistic, but we're engaging it to go to the non-dual, or how we define it as emptiness in Buddhism. And so, this point in the Uttara Tantra Shastra is really interesting, that Buddhas don't have intention. I've been thinking about this for months because it's very, very mind-boggling, because it's like, well, because then it goes on to talk about the Buddha's activity, right? As the wisdom and form bodies, for those of you who are familiar with this. And so the Buddha, it's not that the Buddha doesn't have activity, but there's no intention behind that activity. And that's a wild thing. To me, that's very mind-blowing and also beautiful. And so it also starts to, for me, starts to influence my thinking on relative bodhicitta, because, again, when we're making these aspirations around studying the Prajnaparamita based in renunciation mind, based in relative bodhicitta, and does it mean we need to become like the biggest philanthropist in the world, or to sort of rescue every single person? Again, I'm not going to say either way. These are kind of questions I'm asking, because this gets sometimes mixed in with relative forms of compassion, relative forms of love, even though those are needed to develop bodhicitta. But it's very interesting, because when we're talking about the Prajnaparamita, we're talking about a scope that's so large, it's beyond small and large. So then it really goes beyond. And then when we're talking about what we're developing, when we're developing the mind of bodhicitta as well, it requires the large mind of bodhicitta, that mind that is okay with that paradox, that, you know, that paradox that I want to attain awakening to help free all beings, and yet there's not an end to all beings, and that paradox is okay with us. You see what I'm saying? So these are just some things, some things to get you thinking, bubbling. Like I said in the beginning, for some of you who joined late, I'm not so interested in teaching to like tonight and next Thursday, at least in our format for this teaching, to just like build. I mean, it's good to build our conceptual understanding, as long as we're going to put that into practice. That's great. We need to do that. It's that first one, the wisdom of understanding. But again, it's not about coming to a definitive answer. It's really about coming up with more questions to ask ourselves, more questions to ask our minds about reality and our experience. Really, the practitioners who I, how do you say it, feel the most affinity towards, or you know, who are most inspiring to me, are the ones with who keep asking, you know, who keep you can see they're open to the Dharma at all times. And, you know, of course, there's ones who have realized the Dharma. And so there's nothing more to be open to. They just are the Dharma. But nonetheless, there's this beauty to being open all the time. So, you know, basically what I'm talking about is the three principal aspects of the path: renunciation, mind, bodhicitta, and emptiness. And even though we're going to focus on emptiness a little bit more, it has to be held within renunciation, mind, and relative bodhicitta, as most of you know. And of course, I can't speak for you. Have I accomplished renunciation, mind, and relative bodhicitta? No. So, you know, I'm also working on those at the same time. So it's okay. We can kind of, you know, we work on the method side, we work on the wisdom side, and then slowly those help each other along the path. So, but the key thing I wanted to really touch on is this idea of freedom, and really this exploration of freedom. And hopefully we can talk about that in Q&A a little bit. So what is Prajnaparamita? I wanted to kind of kick off tonight talking about this. So there's a great book. I highly recommend it. I'm going to be pulling a lot of information from it over the next 2 Thursdays. It's called the Heart Attack Sutra, is the name of the book, by Karl Brunholz, a German practitioner scholar. And it's really, really a wonderful introduction and commentary on the Heart Sutra. So Karl kind of opens it up with, and I'm going to quote him, where he says, "To see how things actually are through finely and thoroughly discriminating them, when that insight has reached its highest point, it is called Prajnaparamita, the perfection of prajna. Thus, Prajnaparamita refers both to the fruition or the outcome, the full perfection of that insight, and also the process of arriving at such perfection." So again, in the beginning of the quote, to see how things actually are, right? So if there's anything you take a quick note about, I would write that down. And then secondly, this kind of what we call process vipassana. So vipassana is the meditation, right? The insight meditation that leads to Prajnaparamita. And so what he's saying is in one way, we're engaging that process. You and I, we don't have a choice. That's really our only way to engage this, through the conceptual mind first. But what Prajnaparamita actually refers to is the realization itself, right? And it's not the Prajnaparamita is not something that exists outside the mind of that realization. It's not like some third option that exists outside. That would mean emptiness is permanent and truly existent. And if we've done some study on emptiness, we can see that emptiness is also empty of emptiness, right? So we'll get to that a little bit later. But nonetheless, I really like this definition, to see how things actually are. Prajna, and some more definitions. Prajna, or, you know, we define prajna as wisdom, right? And then I'll get into it, but it doesn't always mean the wisdom of emptiness, but in this context it does, because relating it to paramita, or transcendental, or what goes beyond. So it's the wisdom that goes beyond. But in general, prajna, it's an active, inquisitive thing in our mind. Like I was alluding to in the beginning, it's a basic curiosity of wanting to know and wanting to find out how things really are. Again, a quote I really love from Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche: longing for the truth, right? As a Buddhist practitioner, this is really important. We have to keep this longing strong at all times, keep a lot of endeavor in that. So when we're speaking about Prajnaparamita, we're talking about our mind and its basic capacity to realize how things actually are beyond superficial appearances. Again, some more definitions for us. And so obviously what I'm alluding to is how we arrive at that realization, how things actually are, is through training this prajna. So then, like I was saying, we have mundane and supramundane prajna. So mundane prajna would be learning about the relative truths of things, right? Having insight into relative truth. For instance, like the study of logic in the monasteries, that's a form of mundane prajna, right? But that form of mundane prajna sharpens the mind to help lead to the supramundane prajna, or the Prajnaparamita, or the wisdom of emptiness. So I also like this expression I mentioned a few minutes ago, the wisdom gone beyond. This is one of my favorite translations of how to sort of the Sanskrit word of Prajnaparamita, the wisdom gone beyond. And this gone beyond part, this is what we have to discuss, right? Because this is this is the paradox. Gone, well, where did it go? Where does it go, right? I mean, I'm sure within our Buddhist practice and understanding and sort of over the years, at some point we've thought, well, maybe, Buddhahood is some other space or something like that. And the Prajnaparamita Sutras are pretty clear. No. It's not like, it's not what we're experiencing now, but it's also not something else. So again, we get into this paradox we'll keep discussing. There's also a sense of like a threat from Prajnaparamita. A threat in the sense of, if we really want freedom, this means we have to let go of our clinging to what we think is truth, including who we think we are, what we think is right, what we think is wrong, beliefs, ideas, perspectives, right? Now, again, to be a little bit careful here, on the path, it doesn't mean we let go of attention to karma, cause, and effect. That's important, right? But in the mind, in our exploration, not talking our behavior, but in our mind when we're exploring emptiness, it's okay to open these ideas. But in our conduct, as long as we haven't realized emptiness yet, we have to abide by the law of karma, cause, and effect, because that affects us on the relative side. But nonetheless, it's threatening to our ego and our belief systems. So really, this takes a lot of guts. This takes a lot of courage to explore this. Again, from my side, I mean, you could say it takes a little bit of courage to explore emptiness, just like as an understanding or conceptual idea. I think it does take some courage, but not that much, because emptiness can just become another idea. The Prajnaparamita can just become another idea. It can become a way we bolster our ego, I'm not trying to challenge anyone or call anyone out. Like I said, I don't know what you're thinking or how you are, most of you. But it can become a way we feel pride in a Dharma center, where we say, oh, well, I know a lot about emptiness. This means you don't know anything about emptiness. You see what I'm saying? And I'm saying this not to criticize anyone. I've done this, so it's like, this is a really bad way to be. And I regret it. And I see it as destructive to myself and others. And of course, maybe no one else knew that, but I'm thinking that. And so there's a pride. So later we'll come across a quote of Nagarjuna where it says basically, believers in emptiness are incurable. It's a really wonderful quote. Believers in emptiness are incurable. And so, so what this is pointing at is like the more we feel pride in our understanding of emptiness, it means we didn't understand emptiness. We didn't get it. Because the point is to cut through the pride. The point is the emptiness should cut through the ego clinging, etc. Right? So the Prajnaparamita, because it's based in Indian Buddhism, we also have wonderful symbology and beautiful imagery that helps us to get out of our head when we work with these kinds of teachings. And so I didn't send it to John. I thought about it, but I didn't at the end. But if you Google a picture of the Prajnaparamita Yumchenmo in Tibetan, Prajnaparamita is it's like a deity, like Chenrezig, and it's a female. It's in a female form with 4 arms, and this is the, I don't know, personification, we could say, like personification or the symbolic form of these teachings in a Buddha figure, right? Just like Tara or Chenrezig or name your deity. And so this relates directly to the mother principle in Buddhism, which is very much associated with emptiness. And so this mother principle, it carries with it a sense of the feminine being the space of emptiness, like allowing the space of emptiness. So it has that kind of connotation or symbology in it. And within the mother side of that femininity, you can hear often in the teachings that the Prajnaparamita is the mother of all the Buddhas. So all enlightened beings in the past, all enlightened beings in the present, and all enlightened beings in the future will have been born from Prajnaparamita. But this is where it gets fun. But there's no enlightened being born from Prajnaparamita. So so again, it has this connotation of birth in the sense that someone somewhere had to engage with these teachings and rub up against them conceptually, and then eventually rub up against them, meaning like work with them in meditation, contemplation, until they had direct realization, and then finally traverse the bodhisattva path, and then finally attain Buddhahood. So there is a sense of birth in that way, and we could say that's the relative side, right? And if some of you are confused with relative and ultimate, I can go into that. I'll go into it a bit later, either tonight or next week. And but nonetheless, so there is a sense of birth within that. There's a sense of like getting used to something, engaging a path, doing. But when we look in the ultimate sense, and the Buddha talks about it directly in the Vajrakkara Sutra, for instance, that there is no attainment, right? It says it here in the Heart Sutra. There's no attainment. There's no non-attainment, right? So we have to get our head around this language too when we're talking about ultimate truth. And I love this image of Yumchenmo because she also embodies the path. So for instance, she's yellow in color. She sits in like a Vajra position or cross-leg position, and her forearms are holding different things. So with her upper left hand, she holds a Dharma text. Her upper right hand raises a flaming sword, and the lower 2 arms are in the gesture of meditation. And what these represent is these wisdoms I was talking about. So they represent the path of how do we engage with the Prajnaparamita as a sentient being. We engage through understanding or learning, reflection, and meditation, right? So the learning is represented by the Dharma text, the reflection by the sword that starts to cut through our ego clinging, and then the gesture of meditation as having direct realization. So sometimes when we want to practice Prajnaparamita, at least in the Tibetan tradition, I find, because it has this connection to Vajrayana Buddhism, even within the Maya context a little bit, because it's a symbol, a deity we're working with. Sometimes you can just sit and look at the image. And so sometimes if you get kind of sick of thinking with these teachings, or sort of trying to reflect on a sutra like the Heart Sutra, read it and just reflect on Yumchenmo. And sometimes this is very beautiful because this is how the devotion starts to merge also with the practice and the understanding and reflection or contemplation. And we're all kind of different. We all have different proclivities. And, if you tend to have a very open, kind of devoted heart, maybe you have to spend a little bit more time with the learning and reflection. If you tend to be very analytical, like me, very wordy and stuck in the concepts, maybe you need to just sit and look at Yumchenmo's picture for like an hour and see what happens, or do some visualization practice with Yung Chammo, right? So these are the things that can help to balance out our learning, reflection, and meditation. Obviously, on the meditation side, we have, all of the methodologies of the middle way teachings, all of the commentaries on that, and all these different analytical meditations and direct meditations, etc. So, anyways, just a little bit of introduction into what is Prajnaparamita, and then the Prajnaparamita sutras themselves, like what is the source of this? And so I thought to talk about that, and I think a lot of you know, but hopefully I'm not boring you too much. So really, the Prajnaparamita sutras come out of the second turning of the wheel of the Buddha. So in Tibetan Buddhism, we have this framing of three turnings of the wheel plus Vajrayana Buddhism, right? So the three turnings are, the Shravakyana vehicle, listener's vehicle in the first, which makes up the lower scope of the Lam Rim, basically. Then we have the second turning of the wheel on the Mahayana teachings, which primarily is made up of the Prajnaparamita sutras, actually. And then you have the third turning on Buddha nature, right? And so that we also consider a separate turning. And again, I think like in a learning context, we talk about these as three separate turnings, but in actuality, these were probably not three separate turnings, and they probably did not happen in like that order. I'm not 100% sure because I'm not a scholar of this so much, but it seems to me that the Buddha was teaching things simultaneously. So different practitioners or monks, nuns, lay people, they would hear things according to their capacity. So some were able to hear the Shravakyana teachings, and they would hear the teachings on selflessness, on impermanence, on dukkha, on anicca and anatta. And then some were hearing the teachings on emptiness, on shunyata, on the Prajnaparamita simultaneously. And then, of course, we have the Buddha nature teachings as well. So according to the Mahayana lore and teachings, the Prajnaparamita sutras were taught by Buddha Shakyamuni near Rajgriha, and this is you can actually go there to the site. I mean, maybe some of you have been. It's near Bodh Gaya, and it's just a small hill. So it's kind of like, as His Holiness Dalai Lama has pointed out in commentaries on this, it's not like you have to think beyond the physical space when you're talking about these sutras. They go beyond our kind of normal conceptuality of space and time. So, there were supposed to be thousands of, bodhisattvas joining, and, they can't physically fit there. So we have to go a little bit out of space and time. But nonetheless, what happened apparently is that these sutras, the Prajnaparamita sutras, weren't valued enough at the time of the Buddha. And so they were actually, they disappeared for 400 years and weren't really circulated as teachings. And then later Nagarjuna found them, like he retrieved them from the Naga realm. So I don't know, you guys can ask later if you don't know what Nagas are, but they're a type of a mythic creature that is actually part of the animal realm, but is like more like a spirit that humans can't see, but exist. They tend to exist in lakes and bodies of water and the oceans and things like that. So it's said that Nagarjuna actually retrieved them in the ocean from the Nagas. And this is very interesting because there was a scholar, I'm just taking a sidetrack. There was a scholar I was listening to recently who we have, in the Nyingma tradition, they have the Theravada tradition. And actually what he was saying was like, that's not a Nyingma invention, or it didn't just come from Guru Rinpoche. That even this kind of thing you can think of as a treasure revelation, because Nagarjuna, because we have there are different kinds of treasures. Some are like mine treasures, some are treasures buried in the earth, some are, all kinds of things. And so, he retrieved this out of the ocean. So it's kind of like almost like an earth terma. I find that just a sidetrack, but I find that kind of interesting that Buddhism, when you look at it, is kind of, it's also a tradition, especially Mahayana Buddhism, tradition of revelation, right? And it's not the only example of that. There's many other examples. So what did Nagarjuna retrieve? He retrieved a lot of different sutras. So the Prajnaparamita sutras there's a whole variety of them. Some of them are very long and some are very short, like the Heart Sutra. The shortest one is just one syllable, right? So you have, so within the the Sanskrit and Tibetan syllable that represents the whole teachings on Prajnaparamita. So maybe for some individuals of like a high capacity, they could hear and connect with the Prajnaparamita. For some of us, we need a little more length, right? For most of us, we need a little more length. But nonetheless, some of these sutras are, in 100,000 lines, some are 18,000, etc. So the Tibetan canon has 23 such sutras. So there's 23 of varying lengths of these Prajnaparamita sutras. The Chinese canon actually has a lot more, apparently. And so in the Tibetan tradition, the main, like I said, are 23. The main sutras are 23, and what they tend to call these is the 6 mothers and the 11 children. And so the 6 mothers are the longer versions. That would be, like I said, the version in 100,000 lines, 25,000, 18,000, 10,000, and 8,000. And then there's a condensed version of those. And then the children are like the Heart Sutra, the Vajrakara Sutra. These are examples of the 11 children, which are just more condensed, more short. And basically, when it comes down to it, all the Prajnaparamita Sutras are saying the same thing. So it's not like you're getting a different thing. But what you're getting in the longer versions is it goes into more detail. It's more description. So, for instance, Buddhist scholars will spend time studying the longer versions. In the Tibetan tradition, they tend to study the commentaries rather than the sutras themselves. That's they tend to do that. And just kind of for your interest, I'm just sharing some of this stuff. But in the Tibetan tradition, they also, when we talk Prajnaparamita, this tends to mean study of the ornament of clear realization. So this is a really important monastic text, which goes into the other side of the Prajnaparamita Sutra. So what we're going to focus on, tonight and Thursday, and what we've already been focusing on, is the teaching that's explicit in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, which is the teaching on emptiness. But what's implicit is the paths and bhumis of how you progress through emptiness and how you do that. And that goes into the ornament of clear realization in the Tibetan tradition. So that's why maybe it's a little novel. We titled this Practicing the Prajnaparamita, because in the Tibetan tradition, they would say, if we're talking about emptiness, it would more have to do with Madhyamaka. So it's like practicing the middle way teachings, or practice, like that. So I just wanted to clarify that. But nonetheless, as you can see in the Heart Sutra, all these sutras are presented in the form of dialogues, right? So there's some kind of dialogue happening between the Buddha and one of his disciples, and or as in the Heart Sutra, inspired by the Buddha. So the Buddha enters meditative absorption, and then 2 of his disciples have dialogue, right? And so this is kind of how the sutras happen, and they're not unlike sort of an event or a conversation happening like that, but it's a conversation that's happening on a much different level than we would normally have. So like I already said, the Shastra, or the commentary, I don't know the right English word, the commentatorial tradition. Anyways, the tradition of commentary in Tibetan Buddhism primarily stems from the great Indian masters like Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Vasubandhu, etc., Aryadeva, all these great scholar practitioners, which then got carried into Tibet, and then all the Shastras that were written in the various lineages in Tibet. So like I said, typically in Tibetan Buddhism, they tend to study those a little bit more. That's why if you really want to dig in, that's what you would look towards. So maybe I'll just take a break here and just kind of check in with you all if there's any questions or anything. I know I've been kind of more talking about the history and stuff like that, but going back to the practice side, if there's any questions, just feel free to unmute yourself.
Well, I have sort of a comment,
Yeah,
and that
please.
is, we tend to look at realizing emptiness as the Holy Grail. You know, we're out for that. But really, that's just the start.
Yeah.
Uh, that's
What do you mean by
just
that?
really, because that's where the, it's the beginning. It's the first boomy,
Yeah.
and then there are 10 more. There are 9 more after that of in-depth understanding. So that's really just the realization of emptiness is just step 1, and
Mm.
and then it gets intense. But just the getting to that first step is so much for us that we kind of hold it as the holy grail, but it's really not the Holy Grail. It's just the beginning of the practice.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think there has to be a way. You mind if I comment on that a little bit,
No,
Louise? Um,
no,
I think just as like aspiring Buddhists, aspiring practitioners longing for the freedom of awakening, of enlightenment, we just have to have some way to relate to it, right? So there has to be some way to, normally what we do, what I'm hearing, and I can see this in myself at least, is we reify emptiness. We make it like there's this thing that I'm going to attain, but the Heart Sutra is saying, no, you're not going to attain it. But at the same time, you're not going to attain it, right? So it's like, so it's this interesting thing that is, how do you put it? I want to be careful with this analogy, but it's the only one that just popped into my mind, which is like, sometimes if we really think someone's really beautiful, and we're kind of like falling in love with someone, and we put them too high and it's too out of reach, and we never go ask them on a date. we never like engage because we think, I can't do it. I think this isn't the way to work with emptiness, and you're not saying that, but I'm just sort of adding to our conversation because I think you're correct. And I think that's a nice way to think of it, because the way I think of it now, and again, not saying it's correct, because it's sort of, until we have direct experience, doesn't matter. It's just another opinion. But the opinion has to be based at least in some scriptural context. I think of emptiness as it just is what it is. It's the nature of reality. It's just there. It's there now. It's not like something we get. It's already here. It's just we can't see it. We're blind to it. And so I think of these levels, if you want to talk about boomies and paths and all of that, they're just pieces of seeing that emptiness. Sort of the hand is obscured and we see it. It's just we're seeing part of that. And a Buddha, it's fully unobscured.
Right.
And that's where we get into these two types of obscurations. We term the emotional obscurations and the cognitive obscurations. But that first boomy is basically the removal of the emotional obscurations. That's a big deal. Yeah. Meaning samsara has ended for that person, that individual. They're no longer a sentient being. So in a sense, that's a big deal. And I don't know. I think this is interesting question you pose, or statement, but interesting to reflect on, because it's also like, at that point, the bodhisattvas start to train in the 6 paramitas genuinely, because the other 5 are embraced by the 6th of Prajnaparamita. And so that's when I think it gets interesting. And it sounds hard from our perspective, like the idea of like, okay, for like, if we're taking the full Sutrayana path, not taking the tantric path, like, let's just, that one bodhisattva is doing that, means they have to give away, in some sutras, it's like they have to give away bodies for this amount of hundreds of thousands of years. And that sounds just like really hard from our perspective. But from the bodhisattva's perspective, it's easy because they've realized emptiness, So I don't know what you think, but just throwing it out there for our conversation, trying to get it going.
Scott.
Yeah.
I think the difficulty in it is that we've got to use this language.
Yes.
And emptiness is sort of it's a non-concept. It's not conceptual. And we're trying to conceptualize it in order to have a direct experience, which is why we need so much direction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I think this is where I was advising in the beginning, like the sooner we can get into an open question mode of being with these kinds of teachings, it's going to be it's not only a lot more fun and a lot more interesting, but it also leads to emptiness. I think, I don't know, it has more potential to lead a little bit faster, because it's sort of like, there is some basis of understanding we need to engage this, obviously, like you were saying, we need some kind of guide or road and some concept of that, but it's sort of like emptiness is not based in an answer, because it's beyond an answer. So then there has to be some point where we let go. And I think, the different means we have in Tibetan Buddhism is really beautiful. And this is generally when we're talking about these teachings, I didn't talk about it yet because we're going to next Thursday, we'll focus exclusively on emptiness and sort of all the different ways to practice it. And we'll do more practice, I hope. But tonight's more just introducing. But there's actually like 3 ways to engage the meditation on emptiness. And so we have to take advantage of this. The first way being analysis, which is kind of like what we're talking about, right? What you're describing. Conceptually understanding, and then contemplating that understanding, and meditating analytically. And that's really what we find in the Madhyamaka teachings. That's really the primary mode of meditation, analytical meditation. But there's also 2 more. There is the mode of analogy or simile, and we find that in the sutras. So sometimes yogis and yoginis will just sit with these analogies. So like in the Vajrakara Sutra, for instance, this analogy of like an illusion, like a lamp, an illusion, these different kinds of ways of thinking of the illusory-like experience, the mirage-like experience, the dream-like experience of reality. And so sometimes we can use those as a form of meditating on emptiness. And then the third is direct methods for realizing emptiness. And those are really only found in Vajrayana. So I'm not going to be talking about them really so much, but we have to take advantage of all these, because I think, analytical meditation, just to add to our conversation a little bit, and then I'd love to hear some feedback from you. It's so hard I've struggled with this a lot. It's so hard to even understand how to do analytical meditation correctly, because it's not just analytical. In Tibetan, we call it chegom and jokom. So chegom is the conceptual analysis. Jokom is the resting on not finding what we were searching for in the analysis. And so sometimes we don't do enough resting. And then we just keep thinking. And then like I did a retreat once where just like I got a really bad lung problem because just thinking, and I didn't know how to properly do analytical meditation. So even it's an art to learn how to do it, because we were not taught it, and so it's not just thinking, it's more particular.
So that's interesting, because we haven't been taught that either. We've been taught there's calm abiding and there's analytical. So I think it sounds like what you're saying is that it's a combination. You're analyzing, and then when you get to a certain point, you're doing calm abiding. So you're sort of absorbing the analysis. Is that what's happening? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a little bit different, but and we'll do some of it. Maybe we can do some today. And if the questions keep going, I'll punt it to next week. But if not, we'll do some. It's a little bit different. So yeah, like calm abiding comes as a preliminary, because we need to have a certain stability of awareness to be able to investigate the mind, right? And then once there's that stability or level of awareness to be able to investigate the mind without wavering, what happens is insight within what we're looking for is the prajna to actually happen, right? So there has to be some kind of wisdom sparking. And so the wisdom sparking here is not like the conceptual aha moments. That comes from the contemplation. Of course, that can come from the meditation too. Like we might have conceptual aha moments, but it's more focused on going off that edge like, for instance, I'll just to be more specific, like maybe we take the aggregate of form, right? And we're analyzing that aggregate of form for inherent existence, or if we want to get more specific, for permanence, independence, and singularity. That's one way we kind of can meditate on emptiness. And so we kind of understand those first. We have to study and understand those, and then we apply them. And when we don't find, like directly through the analysis, looking at the aggregates in different ways, we don't find those three things. That's when we apply the chokum, the resting meditation. But the resting meditation is different because it's not calm abiding.
Oh.
Of course, it needs the support of calm abiding, like, because insight meditation doesn't. You could say this. It's like, just to be more clear, calm abiding doesn't need vipassana. It doesn't need insight meditation, but insight meditation needs calm abiding.
Okay.
But the resting meditation and insight, it has a different quality to it. It has, in the Mahamudra teachings, in the Gelug tradition, they talk about no, I'm going to talk, sorry, I have to switch, I'm going on another tangent. There's a vividness that has to come. It can't be like qualified as insight unless there's kind of a vividness. That happens with analytical meditation too, because you're moving the mind slowly within the settled mind, and you're looking at the object of investigation, and you're not finding its true existence or its inherent existence. And then within that is the insight, and then you place the mind there. So yes, some lamas, some people will say it's like calm abiding, but the reason I'm saying it's not is because it has this quality of insight, and that defines it as a slightly different. You see what I'm saying? But you could say it has some element of like, there is stabilizing with that not finding, right?
Right. Yeah. Be nice to have a course on all that.
Yeah, I mean, one person in our, I don't know, I haven't seen him in 10 years, so I don't, 10 years, maybe 8 years. Rene Fusey, I mean, he's really, really good at this, the monk. And so he's like a person you could look towards for that. I tend to rely a little bit more on Mahamudra techniques myself. So like, I mean, I do both. I do some analytical, I do some Mahamudra, and you know, I like both. But yeah, we'll meditate on it here. We'll do some analytical. Yeah. But does that help? It's kind of like, there has to be something because the resting is not like just resting, like forgetting.
Right.
It's placing the mind so in the insight, you know, in that experience of the insight. And that is, in the beginning, that comes with characteristics. So it's not fully emptiness, but as we go more and more, we eventually launch into a full non-conceptual emptiness.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, good question.
Thanks.
Thanks for the practice question. There was a question in the chat.
That was me. And then there was Laura. Laura had one too.
Maybe someone can read it to me, because I have a modified window in here.
It says, I can read it if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
It says, are there many female deities that are the mother of all Buddhas, other than Green Tara and Prajnaparamita?
I mean, you could specifically, I'm not sure, but you could kind of say the female aspect, like whenever it's represented in iconography as a yiram or a dakini or something, it's representing that emptiness aspect. And so you could say, whenever there's an emptiness aspect, it's representing that, you know, saying it's the mother of all Buddhas it's not literal, right? So it's not saying, you know, I mean, the Buddha, as you know, Siddhartha Gautama had a human mother, right? But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the where his enlightenment was birthed from. And so enlightenment can't be birthed. This is another thing you know, the Prajnaparamita is difficult to get our heads around. It's like, well, if it can't be birthed, what am I doing here? But we use these analogies, you know, they're not literal, but it's sort of like when we're talking about the real mother of enlightenment, we're talking about emptiness. But emptiness is not in the future. It's here. We just don't see it. So our mother is with us all the time. I'm going to quote one of my favorite texts. You'll lose my screen for a second. Hold on a second. So this is one of my favorite commentaries. I thought on actually doing it for this session, but then it's a little too long. And this is a where is this? So this is called Song of the View, subtitled "Recognizing My Mother" by Chankya Roppai Dorje, who was a Gelug lineage lama. He was actually I think the tutor of the Chinese emperor at the time. Anyways, he says, let's see, he has this line here. I'll read this one and then I'll look for the one I was looking for. So he says, I've lost my old mother a long, long time ago. He's talking about emptiness. What am I, a little child who has gone mad? What to do? Question mark. I'm sitting together with my mother, who's so kind, on the verge of knowing her, whom I've never recognized. So it's like, this is such a beautiful text. I highly recommend. His Holiness gave a teaching on it, a very short teaching, but you can find it on YouTube, I think. But he's saying, like, I'm sitting with my mother. I don't want to read this. That second part of it. He says, I'm sitting together with my mother, who is so kind. He's talking about, again, my mother means emptiness. On the verge of knowing her, whom I've never recognized. So it's so beautiful, you know? And sometimes these kinds of poetic language get us closer to feeling or connecting with emptiness, because it's like, okay, if it's here, then what's the problem? The problem is we're looking in the wrong direction, right? So all of this is to get us to look in the right direction. But as you all know, there's quite a lot of obscuration. So we have to be very patient with ourselves, very kind, very, very, put in the time with this, because the obscuration is very thick. And what he means by never knowing her is he means this kind of obscuration of being a sentient being, where we circled in samsara for beginningless time, because we're not recognizing our mother, which is emptiness, which is the nature of our mind, which is the nature of our, I hate to use the word being because it gets weird here, but like the nature of our non-being, to be kind of new agey a little bit. I apologize. I try not to get too new agey in traditional Buddhist teachings, if you know what I mean. Does that help? I know that doesn't answer your question, but yeah, any female, thanks. Yeah, any female iconography that you connect with is fine, And the truth is, emptiness goes beyond male and female. So we're just using it as a symbol, right? But emptiness has no gender. It has no. Emptiness is beyond gender. Actually, the Vimalakirti Sutra is one of the first written accounts you see of like gender nonconformity, which is really interesting. In order to teach one of the monks a lesson who was disparaging women, Vimalakirti, he was a Mahasiddha. He was great realized one. So he transforms himself into a woman in front of the monk, and the monk's like freaked out, and it broke his mind that around gender and his kind of bias there. But it's recorded in the sutra. It's very interesting. Anyways, getting off topic now. All right, we have a few minutes if there's anything else. Otherwise, we'll do a little bit of practice together just to close. All right. So if you want to find a posture that you can sort of sit relaxed but upright, that'd be great. Just settle into your body for a moment. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel your hands in your lap or on your knees. If you want to close your eyes, go for it. Also, you can have them half open or fully open like me, just kind of looking downwards a little bit. If you want to connect with the breath, just to have something to anchor your attention and awareness to, go ahead and do that for a minute or two. And we'll just do a very short meditation on interdependence, using dependent origination or interdependence as our basis for our meditation on emptiness. So we're going to practice this Chegom Jokom, this analytical resting style I was talking about. So we'll take the aggregate of form, the body, your physical body, the skin, bones, blood, organs, teeth, eyes, ears, hair, nails. And so reflecting on the self, our sense of ourself within the body. And so we have to infer, just through logical reasoning, if the self existed somewhere in the body, the sense of the self. And first, you may have to just turn your awareness towards your sense of yourself. And that's a very slippery snake. So don't try to grab it, because as soon as you try to grab it, it slips away. So don't look too hard, just like a little bit. Where do you feel yourself in your body? Maybe that's a better question. And so if this self exists inherently within the body, we should be able to find it somewhere. And it should be independent, meaning just existing on its own, not dependent on parts, not dependent on any other conditions or factors. And so a lot of you who studied Buddhism a lot, you have to kind of forget your conceptual understanding here. And what I mean is, you have to forget like what you know about emptiness, because in our mind we say, oh yeah, well, self doesn't exist, it doesn't inherently exist there. That's not what we're trying to do. We have to stay open with like a question and kind of like pretend we're more dumb than we are, because I know you all are really smart, but sometimes if we're too smart, we ruin the meditation. So what I mean by this is just look with the mind. And we apply the analysis very gently. The sense of, okay, I feel the self in my chest. I don't know where you feel it, but I kind of feel a sense of self there. Maybe some of you feel it in the head more or somewhere else. And so we look part by part. Okay, if it should be findable within a certain part. Now, when you come to that part is made of parts, right? So look at the parts of that part. So my chest has bones and skin, flesh. Each of those has parts. So just do a little bit of a direct investigation. The analysis is like that. And as you're looking into the parts with the mind, when the sense of self starts to loosen, which it may not in a 3-minute meditation, we just let go. Be with that sense of like, almost like a fist opening a little bit. And of course, this might take more time. But for now, we'll do it together. So doing a little bit of analysis, looking for an independent self within that part of your body, but noticing, there's parts. And those parts are made of more parts, and seeing that directly. And there's also a mind seeing that, which is another part. And which part of the mind is the mind? And when you start to experience directly a loosening, which we'll just pretend we're experiencing that now, just let go and rest with that insight, which is the loosening of the self, not finding the self within the aggregate of an independent form. Just be okay with that. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have some big aha, ooh, I see emptiness. Just be okay with how it is. And then gently, we go back to the reflection again. Maybe going to other parts of the body as a whole. You don't need so many things to analyze, just like a few things, like, okay, there's parts of the body, this part breaks down into that into atoms. And then of course there's a perception of this through the mind. I like to use the mind. It's a little bit more Mahamudra style. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche points out a lot. We have to see the gakcha, or the object to be refuted. This is really important. An object to be refuted in this case is the independent self, somewhere in the form. So again, a little bit of analysis and then let go and be with the space that that analysis created, or that analysis led us to, is a little more accurate. It's a type of not finding. Even if it's not a fully not finding, just be satisfied with that and go back to analysis. Again, and that not finding becomes more and more not findable, I guess. The way to put it. Okay, so we'll stop here just because of the time. Apologize, it's very short. But I hope this gives you a little bit of like a spirit of this, right? A spirit of this kind of practice. And we'll do much more next week. Maybe we'll even start with that, unless there's some new people, and then I might have to onboard them a little bit. But how, just real quick, how was that for, I know it's real short, but.
It was good. I liked it.
Yeah.
Refreshing.
Refreshing. Okay. We're able to connect with, the thing to connect with is you have to do your own kind of, we're each different. So maybe some of us have to analyze a little bit more, but it's okay to just let go sometimes. Like it's okay. You don't have to continue the analysis, because emptiness is not something we can see. This is what's very tricky, because our conceptual mind is telling us, you have to get it, you know, like Eloise was pointing out this sense of like a holy grail, right? And I think around that whole, which I have a very much a holy grail mentality with it, you know, it becomes this like prize to get, but there's nothing to get, you know? And so we have, through the letting go and being with what the analysis didn't find, that then we start to connect a little bit more like that. The other side of this, which we're not really talking about because I'm more taking a Madhyamaka approach, is, but there's still appearance, right? So even though you didn't find, it's not that the self became non-existent, right? So we're going to talk about this next week. This most famous phrase in the Heart Sutra: form is emptiness, emptiness is form, emptiness is none other than form, form is none other than emptiness. So what we just did is we practiced form is emptiness. So maybe between now and next Thursday, just keep working with that, you know? And I think you guys have a lot of teaching, so you have a lot of ways to work with this, right? But do some practice so this doesn't just be conceptual, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes. And next week we'll talk about the emptiness as form a little bit more, because we work with form as emptiness, and then now emptiness is form. But generally in the Madhyamaka, especially in the Galuga approach, they focus a little more on the form as emptiness. So to be true to that, we'll click on that a little more. All right, sound good?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Scott.
thanks everyone. I enjoyed this a lot. Hopefully I wasn't too wordy.
Thank you, Scott.
No, but I have I mean, I know it's time's up, and you don't have to answer this now, but
Go for it, yeah.
not what it's not really what you're teaching on, but you were saying that you do things more from a Mahamudra practice. You do Mahamudra practice, and I'm really interested in what that is, but you don't have to. I mean, maybe next time.
Yeah, it's a big topic, because to get into what Mahamudra is, but I do both, you know, because like, you know, when we're working with emptiness, we have to take advantage of all the methods, but the analytical is kind of like, especially in the Galuga tradition, it's unavoidable. We have to go through some door of that and study and things like that. And so Yeah, and then also in the Gelug tradition, we have the Gelug Kagyu tradition of Mahamudra, which is just basically all the things we're talking about, but we relate it to the mind. So what really, when you really look at the meditation styles, what distinguishes the Vipassana is generally here we're using analytical meditation with self or phenomena, and it has to do with the five aggregates, so it includes mind. But in Mahamudra, they exclusively work from the level of mind. So I find this sometimes more direct for me because, and again, it's just proclivities, just we're not all the same. So for my proclivities, because there's a sense of when you've interrupted the object to be refuted in the mind, it interrupts all the other projections happening because everything is projected from the mind. So Mahamudra goes to the mind. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the short answer.
Yeah, no, I always try to relate it to Vajra. I'm totally spacing that. Like Mahamudra is, you're saying it's a Gelug tradition. Gelug Kagyu, is that what you said?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to, the Kagyu here doesn't mean, well, some lamas interpret it as Kagyu meaning like Kagyu lineage, but really just means ear whispered, because that's what Kagyu means in Tibetan.
Oh.
So it's the Gelug ear whispered Mahamudra tradition. And so it's a Sutrayana Mahamudra tradition that came through the first Panchen Lama, I believe. And,
no, it just if for some reason Mahamudra makes me think of Vajrayana.
yeah.
It's more similar to Vajrayana than, I don't even know.
No, it's okay. It's a good question. Yeah, the Mahamudra has two aspects: Sutrayana Mahamudra and Vajrayana or Tantra Yana Mahamudra. So in general, the text that's the most popular in the Gelug tradition, it's really like one of our only texts in Mahamudra. It's focused on Sutrayana Mahamudra.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, they're a little bit different styles. Yeah, Vajrayana Mahamudra focuses more with Tumo and Deity Yoga and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, good questions. Thank you, guys. Please bring more questions for next time too. I want you to really reflect here and listen to the recording if you need to again. We got to dedicate. Sorry, it went over. I get excited. When you're excited about the Dharma, I'm excited. All right, so we'll just do once in Tibetan and once in English. Gewadi nyurdu da lama sangye drogirne drowa chikyang mala pa deyi sala gopar sho. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. Chanchu samjo rinpoche makya parnam gyegyurchi kyapa nyampa meparyam gone gondo tower show. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Chikten kamdir pende male pa gangla jungwe sampe yijin or kadren songme tenzen gyatso la sowa debso tuji nundru sho. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Pupsa Janjin Jambon Yawe Sinkyong Pawe Konzo Dokbar Chosom Korwe Lemon Tudra Bagso Doje Gondo Jabten Sho. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Magpar nupcho sate jowala Gyawa Kona Kone Lakpe Drinshin Shin Laryang Samjin Chok Regreso Jonna Kadrin Rinpe Kyojam So. Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far off places, especially in the West, mindful of your loving concern for us and intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request, O Lama, please live well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Scott.
Hope to see you next week.
Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Happy practice.